In the remote Cascade Mountains, a solitary hiker named Owen Marris was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. What began as a routine solo trek turned deadly when an abandoned Cold War facility, long buried beneath moss and silence, reactivated with his arrival. Owen Marris wasn't your typical wilderness recluse. For 15 years, he was a top-tier survival instructor with elite military contracts, known for guiding high-risk expeditions through some of the most treacherous terrains on Earth. When D died, the long-dormant electromagnetic field beneath the ridge flared to life. It had no idea it was triggering memories in a man trained to survive the impossible. Owen initiated a methodical investigation that would uncover a buried mind control experiment and awaken the very program designed to erase who he was. What began as a compass anomaly would become a descent into fractured identity and engineered memory. The Cascade Wilderness would never be the same after Owen confronted the architect of his own mind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Owen Marris paused to catch his breath, the familiar weight of his pack grounding him as he surveyed the dense forest of the Cascade Mountains, 6 miles from the nearest trail, exactly where he preferred to be. Alone with his thoughts, away from sympathetic glances and whispered concerns. He unclipped his compass from his belt, a ritual more than a necessity at this point. After 15 years of backcountry navigation, he could read the landscape like Braille. The needle swung north, steady and predictable, until it wasn't. The compass needle spun wildly, rotating in frantic, impossible circles. Owen tapped the glass, then held it away from his body, checking for interference. Nothing changed. He took 3 steps back along the path he'd been following, and the needle immediately steadied, pointing north again. "What the hell?" he muttered, his voice sounding unnaturally flat in the still air. He moved forward again, watching the needle spin into chaos at precisely the same spot. It was as if he'd crossed some invisible threshold. Drawing a deep breath, Owen studied his surroundings with heightened attention. The forest here was wrong, too quiet. No bird song, no rustling undergrowth. The trees stood in a pattern that felt almost deliberate, not quite a perfect grid, but too uniform for nature's chaotic hand. Moss grew thick on the forest floor, but in strangely symmetrical patches that his trained eye couldn't help but notice. Owen set his pack down and pulled out his phone. No signal, as expected, this deep in the wilderness, but he opened the camera. Anyway, the screen flickered erratically, distorting the image before going black. When he rebooted it, the battery had drained from 82% to 17%. "Electromagnetic interference," he said aloud, his voice instructor calm despite the chill crawling up his spine. Localized and intense. He'd witnessed compass anomalies before, usually near iron deposits or during solar storms, but nothing like this. Nothing that felt so deliberate. Owen walked the perimeter of the affected area, using fallen branches to mark the boundary where his compass began to spin. The result was roughly circular, about 40 feet in diameter. Within this circle, he noticed other oddities. Animal tracks that started and stopped abruptly or curved in perfect arcs. A cluster of mushrooms arranged in concentric rings. The absence of any deadfall, as if the ground had been swept clean. Something about the place tugged at a memory he couldn't quite grasp, like a word on the tip of his tongue, or a face he should recognize. As the afternoon light dimmed, Owen reluctantly gathered his markers and took GPS coordinates, though his device kept glitching. He'd come back tomorrow with better equipment. He wasn't sure why, but the compulsion to understand. This place gnawed at him with an urgency he hadn't felt since the accident. Since he'd failed to bring 2 people safely home. The small rental cabin creaked in the night wind as Owen uploaded the few photos he'd managed to take before his phone died. They were distorted, streaked with strange light patterns and digital artifacts, but he posted them anyway to a forum for wilderness anomalies he occasionally browsed. Spinning compass phenomenon in Cascades. Complete electromagnetic disruption. Anyone encountered similar? He attached the least distorted image, his compass face, needle a circular blur, with the moss-covered forest floor in the background. Something about the photo disturbed him more than the actual experience. A shadow at the edge of the frame that hadn't been there. A sense of being watched that he couldn't shake. Owen showered, the hot water failing to ease the knot of tension between his shoulder blades. He'd spent 3 years seeking solitude in the backcountry after the incident, using wilderness isolation as both penance and therapy. The remote wilderness guide job had ended with the deaths of 2 clients, a father and daughter who'd ignored his warnings during a sudden storm. The official report cleared him of wrongdoing, but the weight of their loss had driven him from teaching into solitude. Yet today's discovery had awakened something beyond guilt. A curiosity, yes, but also a strange familiarity that made no sense. He'd never hiked that particular ridge before. Sleep came reluctantly, and when it did, it carried him into dreams so vivid they left him gasping. Children playing in dappled forest light, their laughter echoing strangely, as if underwater. A circular clearing, moss-covered but barren of trees. The children motion for him to join them, but their faces blur when he tries to focus. A high-pitched tone pulses beneath everything, making his teeth ache. One child separates from the group, approaching. "Owen," the child whispers, but it's his adult voice coming from the small body. "Owen, you've come back. You promised you wouldn't." He jolted awake to find himself standing in the cabin's small kitchen, the faucet running. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. He had no memory of leaving his bed. Dawn found him exhausted but determined, packing specialized equipment borrowed from a geologist friend years ago, an EMF meter, a handheld magnetometer, sample collection vials. As he worked, his laptop chimed with a notification. Someone had responded to his forum post. The message was brief. "You've found one of them." A username he didn't recognize. Compass rose, and no other details. Owen sent a quick reply asking for clarification, but received an error message. The account no longer existed. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Logic suggested walking away. He had no connection to this place, no reason to investigate further. Yet the pull was undeniable, as if the spinning compass had transferred its disorientation into his very cells. The feeling reminded him of something his mother used to say when he was small. On nights he'd wake from nightmares he could never quite remember. Some dreams are memories we hide from ourselves. Owen closed the laptop and finished packing. The memory of his mother's words gave him pause. She'd died when he was 17, along with his father in a car accident. Had she really said that? Or was his mind filling gaps, creating false patterns just like it tried to do with the symmetrical trees? He shouldered his pack, heavier now with the additional equipment. The ridge was a 3-hour hike away. If he left now, he'd have most of the day to investigate. At the cabin door, he paused, something compelling him to do one last thing. He grabbed a marker and scrawled on his arm just below the wrist. "Trust your first memory." He wasn't sure why, but it felt necessary, a tether to reality. The morning air was crisp as Owen set out, following the path that would lead him back to the anomaly. Mist clung to the valleys below, the mountains around him still half hidden in dawn shadow. The wilderness had always been his refuge, the one place where the chaos of the world simplified into immediate concerns: direction, shelter, survival. But as he hiked, the silence of the forest pressed in around him. No wildlife calls, no rustling underbrush, just the sound of his own footsteps and breathing. And beneath it all, just at the edge of perception, a high-pitched tone that grew, stronger with every step toward the place where the compass spun. Owen reached the anomaly zone by mid-morning, the words he'd written on his arm. "Trust your first memory," now feeling strangely childish in the daylight. The forest remained, unnaturally silent, but the high-pitched tone he'd sensed earlier had intensified to a constant pressure behind his eyes. He circled the perimeter he'd marked the day before, retrieving his EMF meter. The needle immediately pinned to the maximum reading. His compass resumed its frantic spinning, more violent than before. Something had changed overnight. The energy here felt agitated. "I wouldn't go any further if I were you." Owen spun around, nearly losing his balance. A woman stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. She wore hiking gear that had seen better days. Patched pants, scuffed boots, a faded plaid shirt beneath a tactical vest covered in oddly specific equipment. A modified radio, what looked like a homemade Geiger counter, and various antennas. "Who are you?" Owen managed, disconcerted by how silently she'd approached. "The person who's been tracking these anomalies for 7 years while amateurs like you post blurry photos online." She stepped forward, extending a calloused hand. "Ray McConnell. You're Owen Marris, former wilderness instructor, current recluse. Nice to finally meet someone else who noticed." Owen hesitated before shaking her hand. "How do you know my name?" "Compass Rose," she said simply. "That was me. I deleted the account after messaging you. Standard protocol when I make contact." "Protocol for what?" Ray ignored the question, moving past him to study his markers on the ground. "Your boundary mapping is accurate. Did you notice it's expanded since yesterday?" Owen frowned. "That's impossible. These anomalies don't move, grow, react to human presence." Her laugh was sharp. "That's exactly what they do. That's what makes them different from natural phenomena." She pulled out a tablet protected by a rugged case. "This is the 7th active site I've documented. The pattern matches the others, EM. Disruption, uniform vegetation patterns, temporal inconsistencies." "Temporal inconsistencies?" "Time moves differently here. Watched my stopwatch lose 3 minutes during a 20-minute observation period last year at the Montana site." She glanced at him sharply. "Any dreams yet? Voices? Children?" Owen stiffened. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because it's always the same." Her expression hardened. "Which is why you need to leave now. Post your little mystery online, call it a day, and forget this place exists." "And yet you're here," Owen countered, something in her intensity striking a chord, of recognition that he couldn't place. Ray studied him, seeming to make a calculation. "I'm here because these sites are dangerous. Because people who stay too long don't come back the same. If they come back at all." "People like who?" "Like my father." She looked away, focusing on her equipment. "Government physicist. Disappeared at a site like this in '97. Official story? Hiking accident. Reality. He found something they didn't want found." Owen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "They?" "Exactly the question you should be asking." Ray turned back to him. "So why are you really here, Owen? Coincidence that you stumbled on this exact location? Or were you drawn here?" The question hit with unexpected force. The compulsion he'd felt to return, the strange familiarity. He had no rational explanation. "I don't know," he admitted. Ray's posture relaxed slightly. "That's the first honest thing most people say about these places." She sighed, then gestured toward his equipment. "Show me what you've got. If you're going to ignore my warning, we might as well pool resources." By early afternoon, they'd established a tense working relationship. Ray's knowledge of the electromagnetic phenomena was extensive and methodical. She'd created mapping overlays showing similar anomalies across the Pacific Northwest and parts of Canada. "They all share the same signature," she explained, showing him pulsing heat maps on her tablet. "Like they're connected somehow, or controlled, from a central point." Owen pointed to their current location. "And this one's new?" "Active but not new. There have been reports of compass malfunctions here since the '60s, but it's been dormant until recently." She looked at him curiously. "What made you hike this particular ridge? It's miles from established trails." Owen started to give a generic answer about exploration, then stopped. "I'm not sure. It felt important somehow." Ray nodded, unsurprised. "That's how it works. The places call to certain people." "That sounds more like mysticism than science." "Science is just mysticism we've managed to measure." She gestured to the anomaly. "Low-frequency waves can influence brain activity. The military's been researching it for decades. Project Pandora, MK Ultra, Remote viewing. This could be fallout from those experiments. As they talked, Owen methodically paced the area, recording readings. Near the center, his boot connected with something solid beneath the moss. He knelt down, brushing away the green carpet of vegetation. "Ray?" he called. "You need to see this." She joined him as he cleared more moss, revealing a flat metal surface. Not stone, not a boulder, manufactured metal, rusted but clearly worked by human hands. "I knew it," Ray whispered, her voice taut with vindication. "This isn't natural at all." Together they cleared more of the moss, exposing what appeared to be a circular hatch, roughly 5 feet in diameter. Its surface was spotted with corrosion, and what might have once been a handle or wheel mechanism had fused into an immovable mass of oxidized metal. Cold War era, Ray assessed, running her fingers along the edge. Maybe earlier. Something military or government, buried and forgotten. Or hidden deliberately, Owen added. As his hand touched the metal surface, a bolt of pain shot through his temple. The forest around him flickered like a bad transmission, and for a heartbeat he saw the clearing transformed. The trees gone, replaced by concrete structures, chain-link fences, men in uniform moving with purpose. A child's voice called out, a name that wasn't his but felt achingly familiar. "Samuel, Samuel, come back." The vision vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Owen gasping. What happened? Ray was gripping his shoulder, her face concerned despite her earlier standoffishness. "I saw something. The forest was gone. There were buildings, people." He pressed his palms against his eyes. "And I heard a name. Samuel." Ray's face paled. "That's not possible." "Why?" She hesitated, then reached into her vest pocket and withdrew a tattered photograph. "Because Samuel was my father's name, Samuel McConnell." Owen stared at the photo, a bearded man in glasses standing beside scientific equipment, looking tired but proud. Nothing familiar about him. "I've never seen him before," Owen said, but the uncertainty in his voice was audible even to himself. A sudden high-frequency whine cut through the air, so intense it made their teeth vibrate. It seemed to emanate directly from the hatch, pulsing in rhythmic waves that felt almost like language. They stumbled back from the metal surface, covering their ears. The sound faded after several seconds, leaving behind a ringing silence. "We need tools," Ray said, recovering first. "Something to pry this open." "You're still wanting to go inside after that?" "Especially after that." Her eyes gleamed with a fervor that bordered on obsession. "Whatever's down there reacted to your touch, to you. It knows we're here, Owen. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be." She gathered her equipment. "We'll come back at first light tomorrow. Bring anything that could help open that hatch." As they hiked back toward their respective camps, Ray's tent pitched a mile away, Owen's cabin further down the mountain. Neither spoke much. The weight of their discovery hung between them, along with unasked questions. At the point where their paths diverged, Ray turned to him. "Owen, what you saw when you touched the hatch, was there anything else? Anything you're not telling me?" The girl's face flashed in his mind, young, frightened, her hand reaching toward the boy called Samuel. For reasons he couldn't explain, Owen kept this detail to himself. "No," he said. "Nothing else?" Ray studied him, clearly unconvinced. "Watch your dreams tonight. They'll get worse now that it knows you're here." "What knows I'm here?" "That's what we're going to find out." She adjusted her pack. "If you're still here, tomorrow I'll know you're serious about this. If not, probably smarter for both of us." Owen watched her disappear into the trees, the spreading unease in his chest telling him that walking away was no longer an option. If it ever had been. Dawn broke over the Cascades in muted grays, a light drizzle dampening the forest and wreathing the trees in mist. Owen arrived at the anomaly site to find Ray already there, kneeling beside the hatch with a crowbar and what looked like mining equipment. "Thought you might not show," she said without looking up, her voice betraying neither disappointment nor relief. Didn't have much choice. Owen set down his pack. The dreams came back, worse this time. That made her pause. What did you see? Children again. A laboratory. Someone counting backward from 10 while a machine hummed. He rubbed his temples, the memories already fading like morning dew. Your father was there, I think, arguing with someone. Ray's expression tightened. Did you get a name for who he was arguing with? Owen shook his head. Just fragments, but it felt familiar. Like watching a movie I'd seen before but couldn't quite remember. That's how it starts, she said grimly, turning back to the hatch. The implanted memories surfacing. Soon you won't be able to tell which ones are yours. Implanted? Help me with this, she interrupted, sliding the crowbar into a rusted seam. Together they worked the pry bar, the metal groaning in protest. The high-pitched tone returned, more insistent this time, making Owen's vision waver. With a final heave, the hatch broke free, releasing a gust of stale metallic-scented air from below. A ladder descended into darkness, its rungs corroded but intact. I'll go first, Ray said, switching on a high-powered headlamp. Watch for any signs the structure's unstable, and Owen. She hesitated. Whatever you see down there, don't trust it completely. Encouraging, he muttered, following her down the ladder. The air grew thicker as they descended, carrying an odd mixture of scents. Rust, old paper, something chemical that tickled the back of Owen's throat. 20 feet down, the ladder ended in a small antechamber with concrete walls and a single metal door standing partially open. Ray swept her light across the space. Cold War era for sure. Maybe late 50s, early 60s, judging by the construction. Owen's flashlight beam caught a faded insignia painted on the wall. A stylized compass rose intersected by what might have been lightning bolts or radio waves. Beneath it, barely legible text, Chariot Division authorized personnel only. Project Chariot, Ray whispered, brushing her fingers over the symbol. I knew it. My father mentioned this in his journals. What was it? Officially, a proposed plan to use nuclear explosions for earth-moving projects. Unofficially, she pushed the door wider. Something much darker. They entered a corridor lined with doors, some hanging off their hinges, others sealed shut. Their lights created shifting shadows that seemed to move independently, as if the darkness itself was alive. The walls were institutional green, peeling, and water-stained. The first room they explored appeared to be some kind of control center. Banks of antiquated equipment, toggle switches, and analog displays. Chairs lay overturned as if the occupants had left in a hurry. Dusty paper printouts, covered surfaces filled with columns of numbers and timestamps. What were they monitoring? Owen asked, examining a panel labeled Subject Tracking. Brainwaves, maybe. Remote neurological response. Ray photographed everything methodically. My father specialized in electromagnetic effects on cognitive function. He believed certain frequencies could alter memory formation, even implant artificial ones. Owen moved to a filing cabinet, its drawers hanging open and mostly empty. A few yellowed folders remained, their contents largely redacted. One document caught his eye, a memo with test subjects, North Quadrant, printed across the top. The names were blacked out, but a handwritten note in the margin read, Subject N7 continues to show exceptional response to Echo Protocol. Recommend advancing to Stage 3 despite age concerns. Something about the handwriting tugged at Owen's memory, but before he could examine it further, a sound echoed through the facility, the soft electronic hum of equipment powering up. That's not possible, Ray said, freezing. There shouldn't be any power here. They followed the sound to another room across the corridor. Inside, a bank of surveillance monitors flickered to life one by one, their screens filled with static. How is this happening? Owen asked, a chill running down his spine. The anomaly must be generating electromagnetic energy, enough to power some of the old systems. Ray approached the monitors cautiously. Or something else is providing the power. One screen cleared, showing grainy black and white footage of a small room with a child's bed, a desk, and drawings pinned to the walls. The timestamp in the corner read 07/16/1982. That's 40 years ago, Owen said, or it's happening now, and the timestamp is wrong. Ray tapped commands on a dusty keyboard. Nothing changed. They continued deeper into the facility, the corridors branching like a maze. Some areas were partially flooded, others blocked by collapsed ceilings. The walls of one hallway were covered, with children's drawings, stick figures standing in circles, compass-like symbols. A tall man in glasses who appeared in picture after picture. They had children here, Owen said, his voice hollow. Why would they have children in a place like this? Ray didn't answer, but her expression had softened from scientific curiosity to something closer to dread. The high-pitched tone that had been their constant companion suddenly intensified, becoming a pulsing rhythm that seemed to match Owen's heartbeat. The walls appeared to breathe, expanding and contracting subtly. Owen, a voice whispered, so close it could have been inside his own head. Owen, you came back. He spun around. Did you hear that? Ray was watching him with concern. Hear what? Someone said my name. It's the frequency affecting your auditory cortex, she said, but uncertainty clouded her eyes. We should keep moving. They found what appeared to be a dormitory, 6 small rooms with child-sized bunks. In the last room, Owen's flashlight illuminated something that made his blood run cold. A name crudely etched into the metal frame of the bed. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Owen M. That's not possible, he whispered, backing away. I've never been here. I grew up in Portland. My parents were teachers. The tone peaked, becoming a single pure note that drove into Owen's skull like a spike. The room tilted violently, and fragmentary visions flashed behind his eyes. A man in a lab coat counting, backward a woman crying. His own small hands drawing a compass rose, someone telling him to forget, forget, forget. Owen felt his knees give way, the concrete floor rushing up to meet him. Through the roaring in his ears, he heard Ray shouting his name, felt her hands trying to break his fall. Then darkness. When he came to, Ray was crouched beside him, her face drawn with worry. Owen, can you hear me? He nodded weakly, tasting blood where he'd bitten his cheek. How long was I out? About 3 minutes. You had some kind of seizure. She helped him sit up. We need to get you out of here. Owen looked back at the bed, the etched name seeming to pulse in his vision. That's my name, Ray. How is my name here? I don't know, she admitted. But we're leaving now. This place is affecting you too strongly. She helped him to his feet, supporting him as they retraced their steps toward the entrance. The facility seemed to resist their departure. Doors that had been open now stood closed. Corridors that had been clear were suddenly blocked with debris. When they finally reached the antechamber, Owen's strength was returning, along with a terrible clarity. I think I was here, Ray. As a child, I think they did something to me. We'll figure it out, she promised. But not here. Not now. They climbed the ladder one at a time, Owen going first, despite his shaky limbs. As his head cleared the hatch and he gulped fresh air, a new sound cut through the forest silence, the distinctive click of a rifle being cocked. That's far enough, said a deep voice. Owen looked up to find himself staring down the barrel of a hunting rifle held by a weathered man in a forest ranger's uniform. The man's face was set in grim lines, his eyes hard but not surprised. You folks have been making quite a disturbance, the ranger said, and waking things better left sleeping. Ray emerged from the hatch behind Owen, freezing when she saw the rifle. Who are you? Jonas Jennings. Most folks call me JJ. He kept the rifle trained on them. Forest Service officially. Unofficially, I'm the one who makes sure places like this stay forgotten. "You know what this is," Owen said. Not a question. JJ's gaze lingered on Owen's face, a flicker of recognition quickly suppressed. "I know enough to understand what happens when people start digging where they shouldn't." "My father was Samuel McConnell," Ray said, her voice steady despite the weapon pointed at her. "He worked on Project Chariot." Something shifted in JJ's expression. "McConnell's girl? Hell." He lowered the rifle slightly. "You look like him." "You knew him?" "Knew of him?" JJ glanced at the open hatch, then back at them. "You two have stumbled into something bigger and uglier than you realize. Something that's stirring again after being dormant for decades." "What is it?" Owen asked. JJ studied him for a long moment. "I think you already know, son. Some part of you remembers." The casual "son" hit Owen like a physical blow, familiar in a way that made no sense. "I need answers," Owen said, his voice raw. "About what happened here. About why my name is down there." JJ shouldered his rifle with a heavy sigh. "There's a place deeper in the mountains, still operational. What you're looking for, what you're remembering, started there." He turned away. "I'll take you tomorrow. Not because I should, but because it might be the only way to put this thing back to sleep." As JJ walked away, Owen and Ray exchanged glances, charged with equal parts dread and determination. The forest around them seemed to watch and wait, the anomaly's high-pitched tone now silent as if holding its breath. Morning arrived with a heavy mountain fog that clung to the trees and muffled sound. JJ met Owen and Ray at the edge of the anomaly site, his Forest Service truck idling nearby. He'd traded yesterday's rifle for a holstered sidearm and carried a backpack that clinked with metal tools. 6-hour hike from here, he said without preamble. "Terrain gets rough. You sure? You're up for it?" His eyes lingered on Owen, who'd barely slept, the night filled with fractured dreams and half-remembered voices. "I need answers," Owen replied simply. JJ nodded, resigned. "Then let's move. And stay close. The anomalies are spreading, creating dead zones. Your equipment won't work and it's easy to get turned around." They hiked in silence for the first hour, climbing steadily higher into the mountains. JJ moved with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades in these woods, yet occasionally he would stop, consult a compass that seemed unaffected by the electromagnetic disturbances and change their direction slightly. "How does your compass still work?" Ray finally asked during one such pause. JJ held up the instrument, an antique brass model with unusual markings around its face. "Faraday shielding in the casing. Special design from the project days. Lets me navigate the dead zones." "You were part of the project?" Owen asked. "Not the way you're thinking." JJ tucked the compass away. "I was Army Corps of Engineers. Got assigned to help build the infrastructure. Power, communications, roads that don't appear on any map. Didn't know what they were doing in there until much later." "And what were they doing?" Ray pressed. JJ gave her a sidelong glance. "Trying to reshape the human mind, create perfect agents who could be programmed and reprogrammed like machines." He looked at Owen. "Some test subjects were adults, volunteers, defectors, prisoners. Others were children." Owen's mouth went dry. "Why children?" "More malleable, better retention of implanted memories, higher success rate." JJ's voice was flat, clinical. "At least that's what Belden claimed." "Dr. Belden?" Ray asked sharply. "Marcus Belden? My father mentioned him in his journals. Chief scientist, brilliant mind, no moral compass to speak of." JJ pushed forward, forcing them to follow. "He believed he could erase and rewrite memory through targeted electromagnetic pulses, create people who believed whatever history you gave them." After nearly 5 hours of hiking through increasingly remote wilderness, they arrived at a nondescript cabin nestled against a cliff face. No roads led to it, no power lines. It appeared abandoned, windows dark and shuttered. "Home, sweet home," JJ muttered, retrieving a key from beneath a false rock. Inside the cabin was a stark contrast to its exterior, walls lined with electronic equipment, some modern, some dating back decades. Maps covered one wall, dotted with pins and string connecting various locations across the Pacific Northwest. A ham radio setup occupied one corner, alongside what appeared to be a surveillance system with multiple monitors. "What is this place?" Owen asked, taking in the incongruous technology. "Listening post, one of several." JJ flipped switches, bringing systems online. "After the main project shut down in '89, some of us stayed to monitor, make sure nothing reactivated." "Why would it reactivate?" Ray asked. "Because the technology was never fully understood. The EM fields generate themselves sometimes, especially if triggered by certain resonant individuals." JJ's gaze flicked toward Owen. "People who were once part of the program." Owen felt his heart stutter. "You're saying I was part of this? That my memories of growing up in Portland are false?" "I'm saying it's complicated," JJ replied, moving to a filing cabinet. He withdrew a folder labeled North Quadrant, Subject Files, and handed it to Owen. "See for yourself." Inside, Owen found test result spreadsheets, brain scan images, and handwritten observation notes. Many pages were heavily redacted, but one document stopped his breath. A photo of a small boy, perhaps 6 years old, with a familiar serious expression and a numerical designation beneath, N70. "That's me," Owen whispered. "One of the most successful cases," JJ confirmed. "Belden's pride and joy. The kid who took to memory implantation like he was born for it." Owen stared at the child in the photo, himself, trying to reconcile this revelation with 30 years of memories that suddenly felt thin as paper. "But I remember my childhood, my parents, my school, everything." "That was the point," JJ said, turning to a reel-to-reel tape machine in the corner. "They gave you a complete life, one you never questioned." He threaded a tape and pressed play. A soft melody filled the room. A lullaby, hauntingly familiar. Owen felt his body respond before his mind could process why, a wave of comfort and security washing over him. "You recognize it," JJ observed. "My mother used to sing this." Owen trailed off, realizing the implication. "Standard memory anchoring technique," Ray said quietly. "They used music to reinforce the artificial memories during sleep cycles." She'd been examining the documents over Owen's shoulder, her earlier skepticism replaced with growing horror. "My father was documenting this. The ethical violations alone." JJ moved to another console, typing commands. The subjects were designated by compass directions, north, south, east, west, limited to 7 in each group. You were North 7. "What happened to the others?" Owen asked. "Removed from the program. Various reasons." JJ's evasiveness was telling. Ray had found another file, this one containing what appeared to be research notes. It says here electromagnetic manipulation allowed for selective memory erasure by disrupting theta wave patterns during REM sleep. The implantation came after, using auditory and visual cues paired with narrative construction. She looked up. "This is how they gave you a false life, Owen. They literally rewrote your brain." 300 miles away in Portland, Kara Linwood's phone buzzed as she sat in her car outside the county records office. The number displayed as Owen's, though they hadn't spoken in over a year. "Owen?" she answered, surprised. The connection crackled with static. Owen's voice came through fragmented. "Kara, need you to... Not real... Remember the lake house? There was never a... Find the records from '89. Something happened to us." "Owen, you're breaking up." "What records? What lake house?" Alarm rose in her chest. "Our parents..." More static. "Not our parents. Look for Chariot Division. Medical records." The call dropped. When Kara tried to call back, it went straight to voicemail. Inside the records office, the clerk had given her strange looks when she'd requested her family's medical files from 1989. Now, looking at the heavily redacted documents, Kara understood why. Pages were missing, sections blacked out. But one unredacted note caught her eye. Adoptive placement successful for both subjects. Follow-up monitoring approved through 1995. Adoptive placement? She and Owen had never been told they were adopted. Their parents, had they known? Were they even their parents at all? Back in the cabin, Owen sat with his head in his hands, trying to process the shattered foundations of his identity. The file contained more photos of him as a child, in settings he had no memory of. Clinical rooms, observation chambers, the dormitory they'd discovered beneath the moss. "Why can't I remember any of this?" he asked. "Because the procedure worked," JJ said simply. "Until something pulled you back. The anomalies have a way of calling to people connected to them." "But who was I before? Where did I come from?" JJ hesitated. "That information was compartmentalized. I don't know who any of the children were originally, only that they came from different backgrounds. Some orphans, some with family situations that made them acquirable." "Acquirable?" Owen repeated, bile rising in his throat. "I told you," JJ said grimly. "No moral compass." Ray had been scanning through more files, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "There's something else here. Notes about a subject who demonstrated unusual resistance to protocol. A child who remembered despite the procedures." "Who?" Owen asked. "It doesn't say, just a code, NS7. JJ's face tightened. North-South 7, the linked pair. The siblings. Siblings? Owen's world tilted again. "Are you saying I have a sibling who was also in the program?" Before JJ could answer, the radio in the corner crackled to life, static giving way to a voice that made the hair on Owen's arms stand up. "Little Owl," the voice said, using a nickname Owen hadn't heard in 30 years, one his mother had used when he was small. "Little Owl, it's time to come home now." The static cleared, and the voice continued, measured and cultured. "The loop is incomplete, N7. You've deviated from your programming, but we can fix that. Come to where it began. Bring your sister." Owen stared at the radio, a cold realization settling in his chest. "Kara," he whispered. "It's Kara." "Your estranged sister?" Ray asked, eyes widening. "She was part of this too?" The radio hissed, then the voice returned. "I've waited a long time for you to find your way back, Owen. Don't disappoint me again." JJ switched off the radio, his face ashen. "That's Belden, Marcus Belden, but he's supposed to be dead." "Well, he's not," Owen said, standing. "And he knows we're here. He's been watching all along." "How?" Ray demanded. "This place is completely isolated." JJ moved to the surveillance monitors, scanning them nervously. The technology was always ahead of its time. EM fields that can carry signals, influence thoughts. If he's reactivated the main facility. "We need to warn Kara," Owen said, pulling out his phone. No signal, as expected. She has no idea what she's caught up in. "There's a secured line," JJ offered, gesturing to an old telephone on the wall. "Limited range, but it might work." As Owen reached for it, the lights in the cabin flickered. The high-pitched tone they'd heard at the anomaly site returned, rising in intensity until the windows vibrated. "He's found us," JJ said grimly, moving toward the gun cabinet. "And he's very much awake." The signal came again that night, sliding through the darkness like a knife, a soft, pulsing tone that wormed its way into Owen's consciousness as he lay sleepless on JJ's spare cot. It wasn't sound precisely, more like the memory of sound, a vibration that resonated in the bones of his skull rather than his ears. "Little Owl, come home now. Follow the signal. Remember the way." He sat up in the darkness, heart pounding. Ray was asleep across the room, curled on her side with one hand clutching a flashlight even in sleep. JJ had taken first watch, monitoring the surveillance equipment from the main room. Neither of them had noticed the signal calling to him, because it wasn't meant for them. Owen rose silently, dressing in the dark. A compulsion he couldn't name pulled him toward the cabin door, toward whatever lay beyond in the night-shrouded mountains. Rationally, he knew he should wake the others, tell them what was happening. But the signal thrummed in his blood, bypassing reason, activating programming he hadn't known existed. "This way, little owl. You remember." And he did remember. Suddenly, the path through the trees, the ridgeline to follow, the hidden valley beyond. Knowledge that couldn't possibly be his own unfurled in his mind like a map. Owen slipped out of the cabin, the cold mountain air snapping him briefly back to awareness. He hesitated on the threshold, fighting the pull. Then the signal intensified, and with it came a flood of emotion, longing, fear, and beneath it all, a desperate need to understand, to remember who he really was. He began walking, his path unerring despite the darkness. "He's gone." Ray's voice cut through JJ's concentration as he monitored the equipment. "The cot's empty. How long have you been sitting here?" JJ turned, instantly alert. 2 hours. He couldn't have. He swore, rising quickly. The alarm system should have triggered. Unless they were designed specifically not to detect him, Ray said grimly, already pulling on her jacket. If he's imprinted with access protocols from before. They burst outside, flashlights sweeping the perimeter. The fog had lifted, leaving a clear night sky scattered with stars and a waning moon that cast just enough light to show a single set of footprints, heading east. "He's heading toward the primary facility," JJ said, his expression grave. How the hell did he know? The way? "He's being pulled back," Ray replied, grabbing her pack. "Like a homing beacon." "We'll never catch him on foot," JJ said, heading for a small shed behind the cabin. "Not if he's moving on instinct." He unlocked the shed, revealing a pair of aging dirt bikes. "These will get us closer, at least until the EM field gets too strong for the engines." Owen moved through the forest with unnatural certainty, following a path that existed more in his mind than on the ground. The signal grew stronger with each step, resonating with something deep inside him that both terrified and comforted. It felt like coming home, but to a home he'd never known he had. After nearly 2 hours, the trees thinned, revealing a small valley nestled between steep mountain walls. In the center stood a cluster of low concrete buildings surrounding a massive satellite dish array. Unlike the abandoned facility beneath the moss, this place hummed with activity. Lights glowed in several windows, and the satellite dishes moved fractionally, tracking unseen signals. Owen crouched at the tree line, a moment of clarity breaking through the compulsion. What was he doing here? He should go back, warn the others. But even as he formed the thought, the signal pulsed again, and his body rose unbidden, moving toward the compound. "You're nearly there, little owl. Just a little further." The facility appeared deserted despite the lights. No guards patrolled, no cameras visible. Just the satellite array, turning slowly, and a central building with a reinforced door that stood slightly ajar, as if waiting for him. Waiting for decades. Inside, corridors stretched in perfect institutional uniformity. Polished concrete floors, white walls, numbered doors with small windows. Unlike the abandoned site, this place was immaculate, preserved like a time capsule from the Cold War. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and ozone. The signal led him to a room at the end of the main corridor. Inside, banks of monitors filled one wall, most dark, but 3 glowing with blue-white light. A single chair faced them, positioned with mathematical precision, waiting for an observer. Waiting for him. As Owen entered, the monitors flickered to life one by one, filling the room with a cold electronic glow. Grainy footage appeared. A small boy, perhaps 6, sitting at a table with a woman in a lab coat. The timestamp read, 07/16/1982. Subject N7 continues to show exceptional retention of implanted memory sequences, the woman was saying to the camera. Baseline personality constructs remain stable after 3rd iteration. Recommend advancing to full identity overlay. The camera panned to the boy, Owen, his small face serious as he worked on what appeared to be a simple puzzle. But the pieces didn't fit together properly, and frustration crossed his features. "It's wrong," the child said. "The pieces are wrong." "No, Owen," the woman corrected gently. "You're placing them incorrectly. Try again." "Not Owen," the boy insisted. "My name is—" A burst of static obscured the audio. The monitor to the right activated, showing a different scene. The same boy in what appeared to be a bedroom, listening to the lullaby Owen had heard in JJ's cabin. A voice spoke softly over the music, reciting details of a fabricated life. Loving parents who were teachers, a home in Portland, a sister named Kara. "You will remember this as your childhood," the voice instructed. "Safe, normal, happy." The third monitor showed the boy again, older now, perhaps 8, strapped to a chair, electrodes affixed to his temples. He was screaming, fighting against the restraints. "I want my real sister," the boy sobbed. "I want to go home." A man's voice, cultured and calm. "This is your home now, little owl. And your sister is here too. She's safe, just like you. But you must forget the before time. It's the only way you can both have a normal life." Owen stumbled back from the monitors, nausea rising in his throat. "Stop it," he whispered. Then louder, "Stop it!" The footage froze, each screen capturing a moment of his forgotten childhood, his real childhood, before the fabricated memories of Portland and normal parents and a conventional upbringing. "Remarkable retention," a voice said from speakers, somewhere in the ceiling. After all these years, the programming held. Until it didn't. Owen spun around, searching for the source. "Who are you?" "You know who I am, Owen." The voice was the same as on the recordings, cultured, measured, confident. "I'm the one who made you, who gave you the life you thought was real." "Belden," Owen breathed. "Dr. Marcus Belden, yes." A fourth monitor activated, showing an elderly man with piercing eyes and silver hair. "The father you never knew you had." "You're not my father," Owen snapped. "You're a monster who experimented on children." "I gave you a perfect life," Belden countered. "When we found you, traumatized, orphaned, broken, I offered you something precious, a fresh start, a complete identity without the pain of your original memories." "You stole my life," Owen said, his voice shaking. "My real life, my real memories." "I improved them," Belden corrected. "The experiment was a success, Owen. You lived 30 years without questioning the memories we gave. You became exactly who we programmed you to be, until the anomaly called you back." "What anomaly? The compass site?" "A side effect of the technology." Belden smiled thinly. "Electromagnetic echoes rippling outward from the original imprinting chambers, they sometimes reactivate. Call to those who were processed there. The human mind is a remarkable instrument, Owen. It never truly forgets. It just buries." As he spoke, images flashed through Owen's mind. A sterile room with strange machines, a girl screaming his name, fire alarms blaring, the taste of smoke. "What happened in 1989? Owen demanded. "The records Kara found." "Project termination," Belden said dismissively. "Budget cuts, nervous oversight committees. They wanted everything shut down, all evidence erased, but some of us knew the work was too important to abandon." "So you went underground," Owen realized. "Kept experimenting in secret." "Refining," Belden corrected. "The technology had applications beyond what my superiors could imagine. Perfect agents, sleeper operatives with complete, believable cover identities. People who didn't know they were anything other than what we made them. People like me." The realization hit Owen like a physical blow. What was I supposed to become? "My crowning achievement," Belden said simply. "The proof that identity itself is nothing but programming, that memory can be written like code." Something in Owen snapped. With a cry of rage, he grabbed a chair and smashed it into the nearest monitor. Glass shattered, sparks flew. He moved to the next, destroying it as well, then the next. But the fourth monitor, Belden's face, remained stubbornly intact even as Owen attacked it repeatedly. "You can't break the connection that easily, little owl," Belden's voice continued calmly through the speakers. You and I are linked at the deepest level of consciousness. I'm the architect of your mind." Owen collapsed to his knees amid the broken glass and sparking electronics, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "What do you want from me?" "To complete the experiment," Belden replied. "To bring you home, you and your sister both, the matched pair, my greatest success." "Leave Kara out of this," Owen warned. "Impossible, she's already on her way. The same signal calling to you is drawing her as well, though she doesn't understand why. The sibling bond was always our strongest anchor point." Owen's head snapped up. "She's coming here?" "Of course. The protocol activates all linked subjects simultaneously." The door behind Owen crashed open. Ray and JJ burst in, weapons drawn, freezing at the scene of destruction. "Owen?" Ray called cautiously. Owen turned to them, something alien in his eyes. When he spoke, his voice had changed, younger, with a cadence that wasn't his own. "The calibration is incomplete. Subject requires recalibration at primary node." "He's reverting," JJ said grimly. "The original programming is surfacing." "Owen, fight it!" Ray moved toward him only to be stopped by JJ's restraining hand. "Careful. He's not himself right now." "Precisely correct, Mr. Jennings." Belden's voice came through the speakers. "He's becoming his true self. The one I designed." "You son of a bitch," JJ growled at the monitor. "You were supposed to be dead." "Reports of my demise were strategically placed," Belden replied. "Someone needed to maintain the work, to be ready when the subjects inevitably found their way home." Owen rose robotically, his movements jerky. "The sequence is initializing," he said in that same alien voice. "Coordinates locked. Origin point identified." He turned toward a door at the back of the room, one that JJ and Ray hadn't noticed before. "Stop him," JJ shouted. "He's headed for the imprinting chamber." Ray lunged forward, grabbing Owen's arm. "Owen, listen to me. This isn't you. Fight it." For a moment, recognition flickered in his eyes. "Ray? I can't. He's in my head. The signal..." Then his expression went blank again, and he shoved her aside with unnatural strength. "You can't stop the protocol," Belden's voice said, smugly. "He's mine again, and soon his sister will join him. The turning point is finally here." Ray and JJ managed to restrain Owen, though it took both of them to hold him as he fought with a strength that seemed beyond his own. The eerie, mechanical cadence of his voice faded in and out, alternating between his normal speech and phrases that sounded rehearsed, programmed. "Calibration sequence must return to..." "No, stop, get out of my head." Owen clutched his temples, his face contorted in pain. "He's trying to rewrite me from the inside." JJ produced a syringe from his pocket. "Mild sedative. Won't knock him out completely, but should disrupt whatever signal Belden's sending." Ray hesitated. "Is that safe?" "Safer than letting him complete the protocol," JJ replied grimly, administering the injection. Owen's struggles gradually subsided, his breathing becoming less erratic. His eyes remained unfocused, but the alien cadence left his voice. "What's happening to me?" he whispered. "Belden's reactivating your original programming," JJ explained, helping Owen to a chair away from the broken monitors. "The facility's EM fields are amplifying his control." "We need to get you out of here," Ray said, gathering the scattered papers and files from around the room. Before, the sound of a car engine cut through the night, headlights sweeping across the window. JJ moved to the glass, peering out cautiously. "Someone's here, civilian vehicle." Moments later, hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor and a woman appeared in the doorway. Slender, dark-haired, with a determined set to her jaw that mirrored Owen's. Her eyes widened as she took in the destroyed equipment and Owen's disheveled state. "Owen?" she called, voice trembling. "What the hell is going on?" Owen looked up, recognition dawning slowly. "Kara, how did you... Your message about our parents, about..." She stopped, noticing JJ and Ray for the first time. "Who are they? What is this place?" "I never called you," Owen said, confusion crossing his features. Yes, you did. Yesterday. You said something about records from '89, about our parents not being our real parents. Kara moved closer, kneeling, beside her brother. I found adoption records, Owen, sealed files, but we were never told. Because it wasn't adoption, Ray interrupted gently. It was placement, after the program. Kara turned, eyes narrowing. What program? Who are you? People? JJ stepped forward. I'm Jonas Jennings, former military, now Forest Service. This is Ray McConnell, researcher, and this facility is where you and your brother were programmed with false memories of a childhood you never had. Kara stood, backing away. That's insane, Owen, tell them. It's true, Owen said quietly. They showed me the files, the recordings. I've seen myself as a child in this place, and I think you were here too, as subject S7. South 7, JJ confirmed, paired with your brother, North 7. That's not possible, Kara whispered, but uncertainty had crept into her eyes. I remember our childhood, our parents, our house in Portland. Tell me about Rover, Owen said suddenly. What? The family dog, the black lab we had growing up. Tell me about him. Kara frowned. We never had a dog named Rover. Mom was allergic. I remember him, Owen insisted. I remember taking him to the park every Sunday, teaching him to fetch. That never happened, Owen. What about the lake house? Summer vacations? Lake house? Kara shook her head. We went to the coast, not a lake. Every July. I remember a lake, Owen insisted. Dad teaching us to fish. It was the ocean, Kara countered. We built sand castles. Mom collected shells. Her voice faltered. At least, I think we did. Ray approached with a file in her hands. Your memories conflict because they were programmed separately. Different narratives, different emotional anchors, but the same artificial family structure. She held out the file. Your real names are in here. Your birth records. Before Chariot. Division acquired you. Kara took the file with trembling hands. Inside were 2 birth certificates. Different last names, different dates, different parents. Nothing connecting them except a notation in red. Subjects N7 and S7, cognitively compatible for paired implantation. We're not even real siblings? Kara's voice broke. Biologically, no, JJ said. But you were paired in the program because you formed a connection, protected each other. The scientists used that bond as an anchor for the implanted memories. So everything I remember... Kara sank into a chair, the file clutched to her chest. Manufactured, Ray finished quietly. Like Owen's memories. Constructed identities, built on a foundation of erased ones. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft hum of the remaining equipment and the distant sound of the satellite dishes turning outside. I found these, Ray continued after a moment, spreading facility blueprints across a desk. The building layout including a chamber marked origin point. According to the notes, it's where the initial imprinting happened, and where the reset would occur if a subject's programming began to deteriorate, JJ added grimly. Owen studied the blueprints, a cold recognition settling in his chest. I know this place, not from memory, from instinct. The corridors, the rooms, my body remembers even if my mind doesn't. The origin point is still operational, JJ said, pointing to notations on the blueprint. And if Belden's here, that's where he'll be, where he's been waiting for you both to return. Why? Kara demanded. Why do this to us? Why bring us back now? As if in answer, the intercom system crackled to life and Belden's measured voice filled the room. Because you are my life's work, he said simply. The proof that human identity is malleable, programmable. That memory itself is nothing but code to be written and rewritten. You're a monster, Kara said, rising to her feet. You stole our lives. I gave you lives, Belden corrected. Better ones than you had. You were both traumatized children when you came to us. Orphaned, broken. We offered you clean slates. Perfect, normal childhoods. You had no right, Owen said, his voice stronger now as the sedative cleared the programming interference. Rights are social constructs just like memory, Belden replied dismissively. What matters is the outcome. The experiment was a success. For 30 years, you both lived exactly as programmed, until the anomaly called you back. Why call us back at all? Ray interjected. Why not let them live their programmed lives? A pause. Because the work is incomplete, Belden finally answered. The true goal was never just implantation, it was transfer. To map one consciousness onto another completely. Transfer? JJ's face paled. You were using them as vessels. Elegant vessels, Belden agreed, for something greater than themselves. Owen felt a chill down his spine. You want to overwrite us completely, erase whatever's left of our original selves. The turning point, Belden confirmed, where manufactured identity becomes permanent, irreversible, the final phase of the protocol. We need to destroy this place, JJ said abruptly, moving to his pack and withdrawing what looked like small explosive charges. Level the origin point before he can complete whatever he's planning. Is that safe? Ray asked, eyeing the charges. We don't understand the technology fully. What if destroying it makes the subjects unstable? Damages Owen and Kara somehow? Better unstable than turned into empty vessels, JJ replied grimly. Kara stood, her initial shock hardening into resolve. I spent my entire career as a social worker helping traumatized children rebuild their lives. Turns out I was one of them, just with manufactured memories covering the wounds. She turned to Owen. Whatever happens, we face it together. Real. Siblings or not, we're family where it counts. Owen nodded, a strange clarity coming over him. JJ, prepare your charges. Ray, gather whatever files you can find. Evidence of what happened here. He stood, steadier now. But I need to confront Belden myself. See the origin point. Understand what I really am before we destroy it. Owen, no, Kara protested. It's too dangerous. He's waiting for me, Owen said. For us. But I'm going first, alone. If his attention is on me, JJ can place the charges without being detected. It's a trap, Ray warned. Of course it is, Owen agreed. But I need to reclaim some control. Challenge the architect of this lie directly. If I'm just a construction, a personality built on manufactured memories, I need to face the builder. Owen Marris isn't your real name, JJ reminded him gently. Whatever you find in there. Names are just labels, Owen interrupted. What matters is who I choose to be now, knowing the truth. Belden's voice returned over the intercom, almost gentle. The origin point awaits, little owl. Come finish your loop. Become what you were always meant to be. Owen looked at each of them in turn, Kara, his sister in every way that mattered, Ray, who'd followed a mystery into horror, JJ, burdened with decades of complicity and regret. Give me 30 minutes, he said to JJ. Then do what you have to do. With one last look at the blueprints, Owen moved toward the door that would lead him deeper into the facility, toward the origin of his fractured self, toward the man who had built and broken him, toward the heart of the lie he had lived for 30 years. The corridor leading to the origin point narrowed as Owen descended deeper into the facility, the sterile white walls giving way to brushed metal surfaces that seemed to pulse with subtle vibrations. The high-pitched tone returned, not painful, now but seductive, calling him forward like the memory of a forgotten lullaby. Every step felt predetermined, as if he'd walked this path countless times before. Perhaps he had. The corridor ended at a circular door, gleaming stainless steel with no visible handle or lock. As Owen approached, it slid open silently, revealing the chamber beyond. The origin point was a perfect circle, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected each other infinitely. The effect was disorienting, endless versions of himself stretching into impossible distance. The floor bore a compass rose pattern, its cardinal points aligned with recessed alcoves in the walls. Within each alcove, monitors displayed looping footage of his childhood treatments, a clinical euphemism for what he now recognized as systematic psychological dismantling. In one, the child Owen sat wired to sensors, repeating artificial, family memories. In another, he cowered as white-coated figures adjusted equipment around him. In a third, he stared blankly forward as images flashed too quickly for conscious processing. The fourth alcove, south, showed a different child, a girl, Kara. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The voice came from behind him. Owen turned to find an elderly man standing in a doorway that hadn't been visible moments before. Dr. Marcus Belden was smaller than Owen had imagined, stooped with age, his once imposing frame now skeletal beneath an immaculate lab coat. But his eyes burned with the same intensity seen in the monitor footage, brilliant, cold, and utterly certain. "I wouldn't call child abuse beautiful," Owen replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "Abuse?" Belden smiled thinly. "A limited perspective. What we did here was transformation, evolution. We took damaged children and rebuilt them into something perfect. You erased us," Owen countered, "replaced us with fabrications." "I saved you," Belden insisted, moving into the room with the slow deliberation of advanced age. "When they brought you here, a traumatized 6-year-old, orphaned by violence, unable to speak, you were broken beyond conventional repair. Conventional therapy would have left you permanently scarred. I offered something revolutionary, a clean slate. You had no rights." Belden waved dismissively. Such a quaint concept when weighed against scientific advancement. What we achieved here was nothing short of miraculous. We proved that human identity isn't fixed, that consciousness itself is programmable, like software. His eyes gleamed. "And you, Owen, were my masterpiece." "Why me?" "Because you resisted," Belden said simply. "From the beginning, most subjects accepted the new narratives readily, their minds eager to escape trauma. But you fought, rejected the first 3 programming attempts, remembered fragments you shouldn't have been able to access." A note of admiration crept into his voice. "You forced us to refine our techniques, develop more sophisticated methods. The protocols we created for you became the foundation for everything that followed." Owen felt cold despite the room's ambient warmth. "And my sister, Kara? Not your biological sister, as you now know, but a compatible psychological match. Children often formed pairs in the program, seeking comfort, protection. We discovered these bonds could be used as anchors for the implanted memories, strengthening the construct." Belden moved to the south alcove, studying the footage of young Kara. She was more compliant than you, accepted the programming readily, but always asked about you, worried for the boy with the sad eyes. The casual way Belden discussed their psychological manipulation made Owen's stomach turn. "How many children did you experiment on?" 28 across the program's official duration. Most were successfully placed with constructed histories and monitored until adulthood. Belden's expression darkened. "Until bureaucrats and moralists shut us down in '89. As if ethical concerns should impede scientific progress. So you faked your death and continued in secret." "With a reduced scope, yes. The most promising subjects, you and S7, warranted continued observation." Belden moved to a control panel in the center of the room. "And now, after all these years, you've returned just as I knew you would." "Why call us back at all?" Owen demanded. "Why not let us live out our programmed lives in ignorance?" Belden's fingers danced across the panel. "Because the work remains incomplete. The final protocol was never implemented." The mirrors around the room subtly shifted, the angle of reflection changing. "The turning point protocol, the ultimate proof of my theories." "What theories?" "That human identity is nothing but a construct. That consciousness can be transferred, not just altered." Belden's face lit with fervor. "Imagine it, Owen. The ability to preserve the greatest minds beyond physical death. to transfer one consciousness completely into a prepared vessel. Horror dawned as Owen understood. You want to overwrite me completely. Transfer your consciousness into my body. A crude simplification, but essentially correct. Belden smiled. My body is failing, but my mind, my life's work deserves continuation. And you, my most successful subject, are the perfect vessel. I would rather die, Owen said flatly. You misunderstand. There is no you to die. Owen, Marris's is already a fiction, my creation. I'm simply reclaiming what I built. Belden activated something on the console. The protocol has already begun. The mirrors pulsed with light and the high-pitched tone intensified, becoming a symphony of frequencies that resonated in Owen's bones. The floor beneath the compass rose began to rotate slowly, and with it, Owen's sense of self. Memories cascaded through his mind. Childhood moments in Portland, hiking in the Cascades, the failed rescue attempt that drove him to solitude. But now they were intercut with other memories. A laboratory, pain, a small hand clutching his, a fire, screaming. Your implanted memories are being purged, Belden explained, his voice seeming to come from inside Owen's own mind. Making space for the transfer. Owen tried to move, to reach Belden, but his limbs refused to obey. The rotating floor had become a vortex, pulling him mentally inward, stripping away layers of identity. Who am I? He managed to gasp as another wave of disorientation hit him. If not Owen, who was I before? It doesn't matter, Belden replied. That child ceased to exist decades ago. You are the vessel now, nothing more. The mirrors flashed in sequence, and with each flash, Owen felt pieces of himself being excised. Memories, emotions, core beliefs. The room filled with projected images from his life, both real and manufactured, fragmenting into pixels that swirled around him like digital snow. The transfer requires approximately 7 minutes, Belden said clinically, adjusting controls. You may experience some resistance, echoes of your programmed personality attempting to reassert itself. This is normal and will subside. Owen fought to hold on to something, anything that felt truly his. The wilderness skills, programmed. The childhood in Portland, fabricated. The bond with Kara, manipulated but real in its way. What was left? As if sensing his struggle, Belden spoke soothingly. Don't fight it, little owl. Let go. Your purpose was always this moment, to become the perfect vessel. The name, Little Owl, triggered something deep in Owen's fracturing consciousness. Not from his manufactured past, but from before. A woman's voice, gentle and sad. Be brave, my little owl. Remember who you are inside, where no one can reach. That's the real you, and no one can take it away. His mother. His real mother. Not the fictional teacher from Portland, but a woman whose face he couldn't recall, but whose voice cut through the programming like a blade through fog. No, Owen whispered, then louder. No. He seized that fragment of genuine memory and held it like a shield against the disintegration. Other authentic pieces began to surface. The feeling of hiding beneath a bed during an argument, the taste of wild blackberries, a creak behind a small house. Interesting, Belden noted, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his agenda. You're accessing pre-wipe memories. That shouldn't be possible at this stage. The facility lights flickered suddenly, and a distant alarm began to wail. The mirrors pulsing faltered, breaking their hypnotic rhythm. What's happening? Belden demanded, turning to auxiliary controls. JJ's voice came over the intercom, tight with urgency. Primary power systems compromised. Backup generators failing. All personnel evacuate immediately. Owen felt the mental pressure ease as the protocol's hold weakened. He fought his way back to physical control, his limbs responding sluggishly at first, then with growing coordination. No! Belden shouted, desperately working the controls. The protocol is at critical phase. Power must be maintained. The lights failed completely for 3 seconds, an eternity in the transfer process. When they returned, dimmer and unsteady, Owen found he could move again. The compass floor had stopped rotating. Belden turned from the console, his face contorted with rage and desperation. Don't you understand what you're throwing away? Immortality, continuity, the next evolution of consciousness. At the cost of my existence, Owen replied, advancing on the old man. No price is worth that. You were made to be the vessel, Belden insisted, backing away. Your entire construction was designed for this moment. Another alarm sounded, more urgent than the first. The facility trembled slightly, JJ's explosives being detonated in sequence. This place is coming down, Owen said. It's over, Belden. The scientist lunged for a secondary control panel, fingers flying over the keys. I still have enough power for a partial transfer, enough to preserve the core protocols. Owen reached him just as the room shuddered again, throwing them, both against the console. Belden's frail body crumpled on impact, but his eyes remained fierce, determined. You could have been perfect, the old man whispered, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. My legacy, my continuation. I'm not your creation, Owen said, steadying himself as another tremor shook the facility. I'm not your vessel. Whatever fragments of my real self remain, whatever pieces I manage to recover, they belong to me. Belden's eyes widened at something behind Owen. No, not yet. Owen turned to see Kara standing in the doorway, her face pale but resolute. The whole place is rigged to blow, she said. We need to go, now. Owen looked back at Belden, now struggling to breathe, pinned beneath fallen equipment. For a moment he considered trying to save the man who had stolen his life, but another explosion rocked the facility, answering the question for him. Let's go, he said, taking his sister's hand. Not biological, perhaps, but sister in all the ways that mattered. Together they ran from the origin point, leaving behind the mirrors, the monitors, and the dying architect of their manufactured lives. They emerged from the facility as the first rays of dawn broke over the Cascade Mountains, painting the sky in watercolor bands of pink and gold. The beauty formed a surreal contrast to the chaos behind them, the ground-shaking final explosions, the groaning of concrete and steel collapsing inward, the acrid smell of smoke and chemicals. Owen, Kara, and Ray stood at the tree line, watching as decades of secrets buried themselves once more. JJ had gone ahead to ensure their escape route remained clear, guiding them through the maze of corridors before the main charges detonated. Is it really over? Kara asked quietly, her eyes reflecting the flames now visible through the facility's broken windows. The facility is finished, Ray replied, her voice betraying exhaustion. But there will be others. Belden's files mentioned satellite operations, backup sites. Owen said nothing, his gaze fixed on the burning building. Somewhere inside lay the remains of Dr. Marcus Belden, the man who had unmade and remade him, who had stolen his original life and replaced it with a fabrication so seamless he'd lived in it for 30 years without question. A life that now felt like a stranger's memories. We should move, Ray said finally, checking her watch, before anyone comes to investigate. They hiked in silence through the morning mist, following the path JJ had indicated before disappearing ahead. After several hours, they reached JJ's cabin, only to find it empty. The surveillance equipment powered down, personal items removed. He's gone, Ray said, finding a note on the main console. Some fires can't be put out completely. Someone needs to watch for new sparks. Take what you need, then disappear. Trust nothing that feels too certain. JJ. Beneath the note lay a folded map marked with red X's, 7 points scattered across the Pacific Northwest, Canada, and Alaska. The other sites, Ray murmured, studying the markings. He's gone to monitor them. Or destroy them, Owen suggested. Either way, he's trying to protect others like you. Ray carefully photographed the map before folding it again. There could be dozens of people living lives they don't know are manufactured. Kara sank into a chair, the physical and emotional exhaustion finally catching up to her. What do we do now? With our lives? Nothing feels real anymore. The question hung in the air, impossible to answer simply. What remained of their identities now that they knew the truth? Were they Owen and Kara Marris with their Portland childhood and teacher parents? Or were they subjects N7 and S7 with pasts so traumatic they'd been erased and overwritten? Or something else entirely, something new, built from fragments of both? "We can't go back to the lives we had," Owen said finally. "Not completely, but we can't abandon them either. They're still ours, even if they were designed by someone else." Ray busied herself collecting the remaining files and data from JJ's equipment. "I'll need to process all of this, understand the full scope of what Chariot Division was doing." She hesitated. "My podcast reaches thousands of people. This could expose everything." "And what would that accomplish?" Kara asked, not accusatory, but genuinely curious. "Justice, truth, warning for others who might be living in manufactured identities without knowing it." Ray paused. "But it would also mean exposing you both, destroying whatever piece you might rebuild." Owen moved to the window, looking out at the wilderness that had once been his refuge. "The truth isn't always healing," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's just another kind of wound." They parted ways that afternoon. Ray headed back to her research base in Seattle, the files and evidence carefully packed away, her promise to consult them before making any public revelations sincere, if not entirely convincing. Her need to expose the truth warred visibly with her growing concern for what that exposure might cost. "There are patterns still out there," she told Owen as they said goodbye. "Other facilities, other subjects. This isn't over." "I know," he replied, "but maybe some mysteries should remain buried." "Is that really what you believe now? After everything?" Owen considered the question carefully. "I believe in choosing which truths to carry forward. The rest," he gestured toward the mountains, "let them stay in the ground." Kara and Owen hiked back toward the original anomaly site in thoughtful silence. Neither had decided what came next, whether to return to their separate lives in Portland and the wilderness, or to forge something new together. The bond between them, manufactured or not, remained the most tangible thing in their shattered reality. At the edge of the anomaly zone, they sat on fallen logs watching as afternoon light filtered through the canopy above. "I've been trying to separate the real from the false," Kara said after a long silence. "My childhood memories, my personality, my choices, but I can't find the line anymore. It's all just me." "I think that's the point," Owen replied. "There is no separation. Whatever they programmed, whatever we were before, it's all woven together now. So we just accept that? Live with knowing our lives were designed by someone else?" Owen pulled his compass from his belt. At the center of the anomaly zone, it still spun wildly, the needle seeking a north that didn't exist here. But they sat just at the edge where the needle wavered, uncertain but not completely lost. "Everyone's life is shaped by forces beyond their control," he said. "Parents, trauma, circumstance. Maybe our situation is just an extreme version of what happens to everyone." He looked at his sister, because that's what she was, regardless of biology. "The memories might be artificial, but what we built on them isn't. The people we became, that's still our creation." Kara nodded slowly, reaching for his hand. "So what now?" "Now we decide what to keep, what to question, what to build." Owen squeezed her hand gently. "Starting with us, siblings by choice even more than by programming." "I'd like that," she said, a tentative smile breaking through the sorrow and confusion. As evening approached, they prepared to leave the mountains, Kara to her apartment in Portland, Owen to gather his belongings from the rental cabin. They'd agreed to meet again in a week, to begin the careful work of reconstructing their understanding of themselves and each other. At the last moment, Owen stopped, turning back toward the anomaly site. "I need a minute," he told Kara. "One last thing to do." He walked alone to the center of the zone where his compass spun in frantic circles. The electromagnetic disturbance hummed at the edge of perception, a high-pitched tone that still seemed to whisper his name, or his designation, N7, Little Owl. For a moment as he stood there, Owen glimpsed a final vision, himself as a child, small and frightened standing among the symmetrical trees. The boy looked up at him with solemn eyes, recognition passing between them across the decades. "Are you me?" the child seemed to ask, though no words were spoken. "Part of you," Owen answered silently. "The part that survived." The child nodded as if this made perfect sense. Then, with a final glance, he turned and walked into the trees, disappearing into the mist that had begun to gather in the evening light. Owen stood motionless, tears tracking silently down his face, not for what he'd lost, but for what had endured despite everything. For the core of self that had survived erasure, programming, manipulation. The essential something that Belden had never managed to fully capture or control. He took one last look at his spinning compass, then tucked it away. Whatever true north was, he would have to find it without perfect guidance, with fragments of memory both real and constructed, with questions that might never find complete answers, with uncertainty as his only constant companion. And somehow that seemed right. That seemed true. Owen turned away from the anomaly and walked back to where Kara waited. Together they left the spinning compass behind, heading toward the uncertain future they would now shape for themselves. Behind them, nestled deep beneath the moss and concrete and rubble, something still hummed with patient electronic life, waiting. But that was a mystery for another day, another turning point yet to come. For now, it was enough to walk away, carrying the pieces of themselves that remained. The end. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, it would mean a lot.